Dr. Jazz.
So I'll just jump in, and I wanted to ask you
Dr.
to
Jazz.
start this talk with your story as a composer and band leader. I listened to Block Party, which is I think the last one by you, and it's such a beautiful
Yeah,
record. And
that's the newest.
how
Yeah.
do you usually write when you write tunes? Because you've been extremely prolific, I think, since the early 90s already. But what's your story when composing?
Well, in regards to composition, just on my own as a player, that's always been a part of my thing since really the late 80s.
Oh.
Composition, playing with different size groups, duo, all the way up to 9, 10 pieces. And I'm also very fortunate because I teach at a boarding school, 600 kids.
Ooh.
But I run a jazz ensemble, usually between 20 and 30 piece band. So this is unusual for this type of thing, but I get to write and arrange my music for these youngsters. So everything that you hear on my albums, I've already played with these youngsters in a large setting.
Wow.
So, and it's part of my gig. It's part of my gig to write. We have 2 major performances each year, and each of the arrangements typically are around 300 measures for a 20 to 30 piece band. So as far as composition goes, it's kind of in my DNA because I need to do it to survive. So typically what happens these days, different in the past, but these days, at least since 2006, since I took over this band, it's called Right Brain Logic. I'm writing every day. Every single day I'm writing music. And so it's just part of my daily routine. Because as you know, you compose music, these arrangements can take 200 hours, 250 hours to think of, write a lead sheet, score, and then parts, and then rehearse them. It's quite an undertaking. So that goes through my year. And then that bleeds down to my personal playing. Okay, do I want to do it as a trio? Do I want to expand the group? And I do that on some of the records. I've added up to, I think, 4 horns plus piano. So kind of small it down. But I'm always writing, It's all a big part of it.
Yeah. Well, where do you get the ideas usually? Behind guitar? I mean, with the guitar? Or?
So where do you get the ideas? Well, as you probably know too, man, is that the ideas come from different places. Let's just say I've been blessed with the idea or the talent to write a melody.
Yeah.
So oftentimes it just comes from a simple melodic line, and then you expand from that. But it could be a rhythm, it could be a color, it could be any of those things. And typically when you go into it, the end result is nothing like the beginning. So it's really like a slow improvisation. As you write it out, you say, man, what would I do if I was just playing? What would I write? So really all of these parts, they're arranged and they're thick, but it's really just an improvised line.
Yeah.
Right. And then it becomes a tune and you designate, okay, what do you want on top? Who do you want soloing? What backgrounds would you like on that? What meter is it in? Is it different than what you just played? So there's typically 5 to 7 movements in these long pieces. And then at the end, like I've mentioned, I might take 1 or 2 of those movements out, which is how Block Party was made. We played a big group, and I even had 3 horn players playing some of these pieces before we recorded. We had the trio with George and Joe Fonda. We added Caleb Curtis and Jason Robinson. And we've had a variety of trumpet players too. And so we worked on with 3 horns and then with the bigger group. And then I said, man, it's just too hard these days to work with a big band. And we were going to Europe, and you know how that goes. It's, I've gone there with sextet before from
Seriously.
America.
Man,
and man,
respect.
it's so hard, and it's just so expensive, and it's so hard.
Crazy.
So I kind of realized that, man, I really, going forward, unless something changes, it's going to be trio tours. You know, it's just economically, and just, you know, I'm 70
exactly
years old, man. So it's taxing too. You know?
Yeah.
But you tour, man. You know, you're a little bit younger than me, so.
Yeah, but it's heavy. It's hard, man. It's like, especially after COVID, it's become even harder in Europe. You know, like the fees went down, and you know, let's say Germany, which was usually where I played the most. Like, half of the clubs cut down fees for international musicians. So, you know, basically they support just German musicians, and it's going on everywhere in Europe. So it's quite hard to set up, like, well, you know, as you know, like a 2-week tour or a 10-day tour. It's
become. I mean, we've been blessed, you know, because Andreas Schur from Company of Heaven. You know, so he's been covering me since early 2000s. Thank God, because I mean, I couldn't do it otherwise. But we were just there in November and December. And you're right, man. It was different. It's different than how it was pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And prior to just this last November, December, we were there in March of 2020, which was like I have photos, and you probably know, we have photos of being in train stations, and we're the only people in this train station.
I was on tour on exactly also on March 2020.
Yeah.
And I had a gig on the day when everything closed down. Like, I mean, the next day it was so many people were on the road there.
We were on the same tour, man. Where were we playing? We were in Neuburg or something.
Oh yeah,
and then we were going to go to Austria, and they closed Austria. And so we were stuck there for a few days, and then we came back to America, and then waited 3 years until last November. So we're scheduled to come back in February. But you're right, man. It's changed.
Okay, super.
On every level, you know. So we just got a call. Like, we'll do 3, and we're back in February. So we do February 7, 8, 9 in Graz.
Really?
So
Graz is like half an hour away from me. We should meet then.
You gotta come, man. Maybe you could play or something. That would be cool.
we should meet, man. We should, seriously, beautiful.
So we have 3 nights in a row, which is rare, you know.
Where are you playing? In tubes or?
Stockwork.
Oh, in Stockwork.
In Graz.
In Stockwork, you're playing 3 nights in a row? Wow.
3 nights in a row, 7, 8, and 9 in February.
That's so rare, because Otmar never does 3 nights. Like, usually it's a one-nighter. Wow.
I mean, for me, man, Mr. 70 years old, I said, yeah, I could stay in a place for 3 nights. That's wonderful.
Graz is nice. Yeah,
so that's where I'm at with the tours. And then around here, just some small gigs. But, you know, the teaching, I do this every day. And I'm off for 3 or 4 months during the year because of the teaching.
Yeah.
But I've got a gig, man. I've been teaching at this school for 41 years.
Wow, beautiful.
And I've never missed a gig because of the teaching. So if I have to go, they're cool with that, you know. So I'm lucky. I'm just a lucky guy, man. On that front, you know, I have some opportunities to write and play some music, and have an institution somewhat behind me to do it. Because, you know, man, it's so hard.
It's hard with the music we play, with this improvised modern whatever it is, you know. It's heavy. Yeah,
man.
Yeah. Well, what does it mean for you to have Joe and George in the band? I mean, because you guys have been playing so long together. What's your story with those 2 guys? When did you start playing?
Well, you know, I'm from California, and I took this is like a story. I took a bus in 1979, 1980. Out to the East Coast just for a couple weeks, just to check out. I was living in Sacramento. I had just come back from the Los Angeles area, and I had been working with Joe Diorio, the great guitarist Joe Diorio, and he was really the cat that put it in here for me. You know, I mean, I had great mentors coming up, but I moved from California to Los Angeles, and that's where Joe was at. He was teaching at the Guitar Institute in those days. And that wasn't for me. So I would go to his house once a week, and I did that for over a year.
Wow.
Any gigs he played, I was in the front seat,
Beautiful.
you know, and I was in my 20s. And so he was a big mentor to me, and he said, man, you got to get out of Los Angeles is terrible. He goes, I mean, it was, you know, I mean, I played like 2 gigs in 2 years. I was playing a solo gig in a Mexican restaurant at the top of a hotel. It was horrible, man. 5 hours a night.
Okay.
It was just horrible. I knew every song in the world, but, you know, it was just me. So, you know, I can only spend so much time with me. So, you know, I said, this has to end. So Joe said, man, you got to go to the East Coast. And so he hooked it up for me and found a place for me in New Haven, Connecticut, where I could stay, an apartment for free. So I started to meet some people, and he introduced me to a fella by the name of Bobby Buster, who was an organ player, and he had a brother named Eddie Buster. They made some records with Sonny Stitt,
okay.
and the cat, the tenor saxophone, the Freedom Jazz Dance cat, saxophone player, Eddie Harris.
Eddie Harris. Oh, okay.
And some other, they made some records, so they had a little bit of imprint on the scene. But so anyway, Bobby was a organ player, and so was his brother Eddie. So he took me into his band. So I worked for about 1.5 years with him on when I came out to the East Coast on the Chitlin circuit. You know, I'm playing all the black clubs up and down, you know, from Newark all the way down to Boston, Hartford, the whole bit. And it was an education. Bobby Buster was instrumental in my life to at least give me one version of how you can lead a band and how you deal with situations on the bandstand. I was a kid, you know, and I was a white kid with long hair in black clubs. I was always the only white guy in the club. And this went on for about 1.5 years. And I loved it, man. It was such an education. Always felt like I was part of it. And again, learned the tunes, and, you know, and so we had a trio. So Bobby Watson would come in on a night, or Houston Person would come in on a night, you know, play with the guy Eldorado Red and Jimmy McGriff and all Groove. And these are all, like, you know, the cats who told me how to do that anyway. And time came on, and it's like, not that I needed new information, you know, so I kind of stepped out of that scene and maybe started my own little scene, as well as meeting cats in my area, which is, you know, Mario Pavone, Thomas Chapin, these guys, you know. And that was my next kind of venture into this creative music scene, because I was learning, you know, I didn't know. I was playing tunes. I was trying to learn all the tunes. And well, these guys, they weren't interested so much in those tunes, you know. They were looking at some other things. I said, man, I'm out of it. I thought I was good, but I'm not. I'm terrible. So I have to start over, you know. Even I had to play with Leo Smith for a little bit. And I felt like such a fish out of water, you know. And it wasn't so much that the music was so difficult. It was just concept. You know, I needed experience in the concept. And, you know, 40, 50 years later, here I am. But I accepted all of that. You know, it was a fertile training ground for me, and got to play with, you know, there was a club in Connecticut that I was lucky enough to be a part of called the Hillside. And the Hillside was kind of a sister venue to a club in Hartford called the 880 Club. And cats would come through from New York. They would come to Waterbury, and then maybe Hartford, and then maybe Boston. So I was lucky, enough to get into those rhythm sections and get to play with a lot of guys, a lot of great guys, you know, Kenny Garrett, C.I. Williams, Charles Davis, you know, just like more mainstream cats. But every night it was different music. It was a different interpretation. So it was, I was fortunate. I was fortunate to have that. And then from that, I started writing my own stuff. And then things changed again. And so bringing Joe and George into the equation, I've known Joe Fonda since 1981 or 82.
Already? Wow, shit, okay.
Already. So he was one of the first people I met when I came to the Connecticut area. and we had a little bit of a rehearsal band with some local players around here. A guy named Teddy Charles. You remember Teddy Charles,
Yeah,
a
sure.
vibraphone?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Well, Teddy Charles wanted to start his nonet again. He had recorded for Atlantic years prior. Jim Hall, Jimmy Rainey played in that band. Yeah. It was an important band, but it was Teddy Charles's arrangement. So he says, man, Teddy Charles would come to Yale University in a station wagon with 2 dogs in the back seat and pull up, and his dogs would stay in the car, and we would rehearse in the basement at Yale University. And Joe Fonda was part of that. And it was a bunch of local guys for the most part, but he was trying to get his charts back together. And we played some gigs. And so there was a festival in New York, and I can't remember which festival it was, but we started rehearsing in Manhattan. And with each rehearsal, a few of us were fired. And so it was like being on a baseball team and waiting to get cut. So it was like, I think it was a 3 or 4 week process. It's like, man, you're going to make the next rehearsal. I say, oh, man, the drummer's gone, the bass player's gone, you make the next one. So he starts bringing cats in with the local cats leaving, So I made a couple of the cuts, but let's see who they had. Mario Kawasaki took my gig. Don Butterfield was it. Phil Macero was in the band. So we rehearsed with those guys, but when the gig came out, it was like, you knew who everybody was, you know what I'm saying? So another fertile training ground.
Sure.
But that's where I kind of met Joe Fonda. And then we've been playing gigs forever with Bill Barron. First time I played with Chapin was with Joe Fonda at the Hillside.
Okay.
Yeah, wow. That was my initiation to that. And as far as George Schuler goes, of course, I knew the name. And I had just moved from Connecticut to Massachusetts, and there was a club in Springfield, Massachusetts called Caffeine's downtown, and it was a jazz club, and they had more local acts, etc. But I fell in love with the general manager and married her.
Oh, wow, okay.
So I ended up booking the jazz room for a while. And was trying to bring cats in, like Sirius Malaby in, and that style of play more so than tune players. And that went in for a little bit. I think I did it for a year, and that's where I met George. George came in with Jamie Baum.
Okay.
And we played a night, and I said, man, I like this drummer, George Schuler. He's a jazz drummer, but he's got this swirl.
Openness, yeah.
This cloud of ambiguity, which for guys like us, that's perfect. Don't describe it too clearly. Let me work on that too. That's kind of the idea. Yeah. So I like Joe's playing. I love George's playing. I said, man, what do these cats sound like together? And that was really the beginning of the Michael Musillami trio. I found a band. Actually, it was after Chape had passed too, so I had that trio thing in my mind. It's like, man, if you can do it with saxophone, bass, and drums, you can certainly do something, not just play tunes, but expansive kind of songs or pieces with guitar, bass, and drums.
Yeah.
So that's how it began, and was in the early 2000s. We first recorded, and I think in 2003 or 4 we started touring. And we usually go out maybe once a year or once every year and a half or something. And been doing it for 20 years.
That's amazing. Yeah. Beautiful, man. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
you can hear it. You can hear you have such nice interaction going on that
Oh, thank you.
It's a band in a way as much as it can be nowadays. But it is actually,
Thank you.
Yeah. But Michael, I wanted to ask you about Thomas.
Yeah.
He's one of those most underrated diamonds of jazz, I think, and that people should know more about him. I mean, musicians, we kind of know about him. Our generation, my generation and older, maybe. But like, what was your story with him and playing with him? I mean, when I listened to your records, that The Young Child and Glass Heart and all that stuff, and even his own stuff with Mike Serene, and that's just killing, like, how was it with him and your story with him?
Well, let's see. So I met, as I said earlier, I met Thomas at the Hillside, and I know that Mario was part of that Hillside scene. He was instrumental. He was the guy who booked that club, and he was hot with Chape. Chape lived from where I live right now. He was about 15 minutes from here, so that's where he comes from, Manchester, Connecticut, and I'm just in Massachusetts, just over the line. So he was a local guy playing international level music, man. The cat was so on fire. And so the first time I met him was at the Hillside, and Fonda was on the gig, and the drummer was Emmett Spencer, was his name, Emmett Spencer, and he had been playing in the Chitlin Circuit, Emmett, and he was a great player. He was in his mid-40s, and he passed shortly after that. He died young. So I said, man, I got to play with Chapin tonight. Jesus, this is going to be a tough one. You know. So he comes in, and he was such a sweet cat, and everybody tells you that, I'm sure. But he was so open and made me feel welcome. He was starting to hit his stride at that point. Just played tunes, you know, Cherokee, all of that. And that was my first meeting with Thomas. And shortly after that, we started a bigger group, and Thomas was part of it. It was called Motation. And we had some local cats. Peter McCarron played the trombone. George Sovak was a saxophone player. Mario Pavone played the bass, and a drummer, Mike Duquette. And it was all original music. So through Motation, I really got to know Thomas quite well. And he's agreed to play on some of my earlier records, 3 of them, in fact. And we became friends, and he's really instrumental. I mean, as a player, forget about it. I mean, I loved playing with him. He killed it on every record that he was on my leadership. But he was such a mentor to me, not just his playing, but his compositional tilt. Like he could write standard tunes. He, like Bill Barron, could write standard tunes with open chord change, thick chord changes, but not predictable 2-5-1 kind of stuff. Like, just like, why would you pick that chord, man? And I studied this music. I studied Chape's music, and I studied Bill Barron's music. Like, how do you write a melodic line and decide on these kinds of chord changes? It changed my life. You know, it made me look at harmony and melody and how it goes together in a different way. And even the template, you know, the song forms that we have, A, all that, that's out the window now. Now it's, you know, it's open. You could put anything in any place for any duration, at any tempo, at any time signature, and work with that. And those 2 guys, I must say, as far as composition goes, you asked earlier, those are my mentors for this. Bill Barron and Chape. And then I got to add Peter Madsen in there too, because he's a close friend of mine too.
Amazing,
And you know, if you want to learn about playing grooves and off meter, Peter's your man. I mean,
exactly.
I don't know how deep you got into Peter's music. He's another unsung hero, in my opinion.
Yeah, I did an interview with him also. Yeah, I love Peter's playing.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So he's a dear friend, but he's a hero to me too, because the same kind. And we've been recording too. We did a nice duo record a few years back.
Yeah, I know. That's a beautiful one. Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So those are my cats. You know, that's where I get it. Mingus too. You know, compositionally, I think I relate to how he can spread out a somewhat seemingly simple line and expand that line into beautiful chaos.
Yeah, so nicely put. Yeah. What was it easy for you in the beginning to start leading bands? You know, or how have you developed also as a band leader now? If you look back, like, I don't know, more than 30 years, and in the beginning,
a little bit scary, you know, because up until really the end of Motation, maybe later 90s, 97, 98, you know, I made a conscious decision. It's like, I don't want to be a sideman anymore. You know, I don't want to be looked upon as that. I play the role still, but you know, so that it was tough. I mean, it was tough, to be honest, because if you choose a different role in this music, people accept you in that different role. So you end up cutting off a lot of people who would ordinarily call you for performances and say, man, he doesn't want to, you know, I'll call Musillami. No, he doesn't want to do that anymore. He's not really interested in that. And that's what happened to me. So it's almost like you had to, like being an attorney, you hang your shingle out, leader. I want to be a leader now, right?
Yeah.
So what does that mean? Okay, that takes on another response. I have to get some music to play if I'm going to be a leader. And I have to have some gigs if I'm going to be a leader. And I have to have something that's different than anybody else if I want to be a leader. Otherwise, I'm just copying people. So that's how the trio, or that kind of play kind of came about, is, hard thought. And I've been doing it a long time, man. I'm 70 years old now. So, I've been trying to get this right for over 50 years. And I still haven't figured it out, really. Just, Monday turns into Tuesday, and maybe I got a new idea on Tuesday, that kind of thing. So, but I'm still working on it. I'm still writing,
Yeah, that's amazing.
That takes up every day.
Yeah, yeah. No,
but over I know I've read a little bit of your bio, man. You got 300 pieces, man. That knocks me out. I got about 100 of them, and I think that's a lot. So I got to catch up to you, Sam.
Oh man, no, I had periods, like when I was just writing, also like you say, just writing out ideas. I mean, I slowed down a little in the last few years, and I'm kind of revisiting older stuff, and I find it interesting now. But yeah, I was just writing, every time I had a new group or a tour, I wrote 12 tunes, and I just love writing as much as playing,
Do you do longhand on paper and pencil?
On paper, yeah, with pencil and paper. Just with guitar, I would be like, okay.
Okay.
Well, let's see what it is, and then
I'm in the same boat with you, man. And I'm sitting there with paper, pencil, and a ruler, and
that's the best, right?
I think so. People always not make fun of me, but take me to the task and say, man, why don't you just get a software and do it that way? I said, man, it's different. It's the composition will end up being quite different, maybe better, I don't know, but it will be different if I don't do it.
Yeah.
I want to see coffee stains on my music. I want to see sweat. I want to see blood. I want to see things crossed out. I want to see notes on the side. And I still, I have all those compositions for decades and decades. And I'm the same boat as you, man. I just keep the same way, longhand.
Yeah.
And it takes a long time. But
I mean, I usually put it into Sibelius later to hand out the music, because I remember the first time I went to New York, and I did a recording with Tom Rainey, Elias, and Malaby, and I handed out. My handwriting is not the nicest, so I did like sharps and flats, and I didn't write like E flat key or whatever. I just did like kind of Sam River style, like, or Kenny Wheeler.
Yeah.
And I was really bad, and the sharps were like over the quarter notes or whatever. And then Elias was like, "What the fuck, man? What is this now? You got to learn your shit. Is this like an F sharp or what is it? G sharp?" Or I'm sorry, man. So, but then I started using just.
We live, we learn, man.
We learn, we learn. But that's the best way to learn.
Yeah. That's the way it's supposed to be. You live through an event, and you said, man, I have to change it up a little bit. And that, to me, that's the natural way you learn something. You don't want to be forced to do things you don't want to do.
Yeah.
So I hear you loud and clear, man.
Yeah, especially with those cats, that's like the A league. It's like if someone like that says something, you're like, okay, shit, I better listen. They've done a lot of stuff, so
yeah.
So
those cats, man, they can play.
They can play. We did my first recording in 2 hours in New York in Systems 2. It was like 12, 11 tunes, like everything was first take, like let's do
2 hours.
2 hours, the whole session. I mean, I was happy because it's a burning record and I saved a lot of money, but it was just like
right.
Okay, next. Oh shit. Okay, I guess that's it.
Yeah.
They were just killing it. I mean, that's like, those cats. It's incredible. I love that. Inventors, yeah.
Too, but we all are. I mean, we're inventors. We have a different thing to say.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, definitely. Yeah. Michael, speaking of inventing, what's the story behind Playscape? I mentioned it before. Like, that it's such an important label. I mean, at least for me, you know, there's so many great records on this label that you founded. And how did you decide to do that? And
thank you, man. Well, Playscape Recordings. I personally had a couple of records. I had a record in the 90s called The Young Child on a little New York like Stat Records. I don't know if you ever remember this. It'd been around forever.
With Thomas.
A guy named Bernie Brightman was the run, and they made their money off Reefer Madness, the record Reefer Madness, if you remember that one. And so he had a little label. Then he would put out records. He would give you CDs as payment, you know, that kind of thing. And Chapin was on that first one. I did another one, my own project, and there was a label called Evidence out of Philadelphia area, and they put a bunch of records out, and that was Glass Art. And then I did a third one, and it's pretty much the same group, Chapin, but Claudio Raditi was on this other one. Who else? Ralph Moore, I think, was on it. And so I had these kind of big records, and they were just license agreements. So those license agreements ran out. So I was sitting on these 3 records, and Mario and I were pretty tight at that time. And there was a couple of other guys that I knew in this area, a guy named Andy Jaffe, who was a piano player. And he had a great record that was out of print, had Branford Marsalis on it and Marvin Smitty Smith, and he was their teacher at Berkeley. So I knew Andy was sitting on this. So I had my 3. Mario had a couple of oldies that were out of print, and Andy Jaffe. So I started Playscape with my 3 and 2 or 3 of Mario's and Andy Jaffe. So it was 6 records, and that's how the label began. But really, I mean, things are a bit different now. But in those days, in order for you to get a record deal, I don't even think we had cell phones at that point. So in order to get a deal, man, you had to call a label, send your stuff. Hopefully they would write. If it was Europe, it would take months for them to write back to you. You know, it was such a slow process, and it was so defeating. You know, no matter how you thought your level your music was at. So I said, man, why can't I do that? I could do that. I could set up a label and set up a website and start my own. I knew enough guys. I've been doing it long enough. They're all in the same boat I am. We all have great recordings with guys who are known. And I said, well, we could have a point of view on in this music. Why not? So that's how Playscape began. I set it up. I had $30,000 to set this whole thing up, and started with those 6. I added Tom Christensen, who's a great saxophone player.
He's amazing. I love him.
Amazing cat. He was so sweet. Put a couple of his records out, and just kept adding. And then we started with Madsen and Mario, and George Schuler had 3 or 4 on the label. So it kind of grew because there's such a need for it. You know, there was such a need for cats who weren't playing all the big festivals. They're just playing clubs, getting by, but making great music, you know, that needed to be heard. And I set it up in a way that I wasn't going to make any money on any of this stuff. You know, I just tried. My goal was to keep the label going so that I could produce my own music, as well as all of these other people that I believed in. Even had Ted Rosenthal, who was more of an inside player, but and he's a friend of mine. And I thought that might give the label a bit of balance too. Maybe bring in some folks that have a different point of view on the music. And that was highly successful, man. There were a few years there where we did quite well with Ben Chape, of course. After he passed, you know, I worked with his wife, Terry, and we put out, I think, 3 different releases, one of them being a 3 CD set. So it just kept adding. You know, the people who were in my sphere would touch the shoulders of people that were in their sphere, and that's how Playscape kept going. You know, I mean, every day I would come home and say, hi, this is so-and-so. I've got a new piece. Can I send it to you? And I said, I'll never refuse anybody, in the sense that I'll listen to it, and I'll be quite honest with them if I take it or if I don't take it. And that's kind of how I played it. So That's Playscape. And I think we have almost 80, 85
Yeah, it's incredible.
releases now.
Yeah.
It really is, you know, and so we have a new one coming out with Jason Robinson. It's called Ancestral Numbers 1, and then we have an Ancestral Numbers 2 coming out in October. This will come out in May. But Joshua White, the pianist, and Ches Smith, and I'm looking at the record now. Michael Deason, trombone, Drew Grass. This album is killing.
That's killing, man. I have to check it out. Okay.
So you should check this one out. It's top, man. It's killing it, and it's surprising, and it's just a different point of view. But it's jazz, and it's in, and it's out, and I think you'll dig it. Yeah, so that'll come out in May. So we're still doing, you know, we're still adding to the catalog, and this climate is so bad for labels. You know, it's we just try to keep going. You know, it's not a moneymaker for a little guy like me. You know, I don't know how the big labels are doing, but you know, it's pretty much download. You sell a couple of hard copies and hope you get a tour.
Yeah,
and that's really how you keep it going, is you get a tour. You know, so all of these people are playing and they're working, and you need new music to go out and play. So that's kind of the premise of Play now, is let's have a nice calling card for you and go out and play your music.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, where I'm at. It's not about anything more. We'll put a couple ads, you know, on when we have a release, we put a couple ads in the paper once in a while and downbeat, but that's not necessarily our audience anymore anyway. So
yeah, I'm not sure.
That's kind of where we are. We'll keep doing it. I got no other alternative, man. I got to keep placing
absolutely.
It going.
But it's such an important archive you've created. I think, you know, it's that probably otherwise, I don't know if where it would have ended, you know. So I think it's important what you're doing, because all these quite under the radar guys, you know, like Mario and Peter and Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, what would everybody have done? I mean, there's a lot of music that we put out, and to go through your music life, I remember how it was before Playscape and how stressful it was to try to get you, in simple terms, to try to get people to hear what you've done. And Playscape relieved all of that stress. That Mario, myself, Peter, George, we all knew, even put Joe Fonda's music out, that we knew that we had a place to get this, to release this music, and we had a publicist, and we could, you know, all the things that big labels do, we did. You know, we were on the radio, we got reviews, blah blah blah. So you know, we participated in that for a good number of years.
Yeah,
things are changing now. It's much harder now, but
yeah. It's a bizarre world out there musically. I mean, releasing music. I'm always questioning what's the idea. I mean, I love making records, and I still make too many of them, I guess, but it's just sometimes I question it, like how to release it, or release it in hard form, or only digital, or
Yeah, well, when you figure that out, man, can you shoot me an email that says
I'll give you the recipe.
Give me the recipe, man.
Yeah, I have no idea, man.
I don't have the answer, you know. I guess in simple terms, we just want to get the music out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
That's what's happening. All the other stuff, it's part of it.
Yeah.
You know, I can't change that.
No. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. Well, Michael, also one question, not to take too much of your time, but how was like Mario like to work with, and as a composer and as a player? You know, what's yours? I mean, you told your story with Thomas, and what's your story with Mario? I mean, he's also one of my, you know, favorite cats out there. I have him in so many CDs actually. And how did you guys hook up? And
yeah, I mean, he's made some great records, you know. Let's see. I met him in 1980.
Already?
Mario.
Wow, shit, that's early.
81, and we had a rehearsal band, and it's one of the first people I met when I came out from California. He was more of a free player than a tunes player, than a changes player. So he played changes. Through the years, you know, it's funny. Like he was not a traditionally trained musician. You know, he played by ear, and knew the music, knew the history of the music, knew the important players in the music. He understood all of that. As far as compositions go, you know, Mario would write bass lines, short bass lines, like 10 bars, 12 bars. And he didn't write music necessarily. So if he had some things, he would say, you want to come over and write these lines out. I would write the bass lines, 10 bars, 12 bars, A section, B section, usually very short. And then what he would do is ask different people to write arrangements of those bass parts. So it could be me, could be Mattson did some, Marty Ehrlich did some arranging. Chape, I don't know if Chape did the arranging early on, I can't remember. Bernstein, a trumpet player, Stephen Bernstein, he did some arranging. And at the end, Dave Ballou did the arranging, right? The trumpet player. And that was really I think his last guy who did it. So for me, what Mario brought to the table was the element of surprise, because he didn't deal with the tradition necessarily in his compositions. He dealt with Mario, and that made his music quite, even if he didn't write the arrangements and the harmonies, he couldn't do that. But he had a point of view on his music, and he would always, if you read about his liner notes and the story, he would always give you the line that his music starts from the bass up, and that's exactly right. Like, he would write these irregular, you know, sometimes uncomfortable, rhythmically bass lines, but once arranged, man, it was a beautiful thing, you know, because that line was so cool that everything would spring off of that. So you could slow it down. You could take pieces of it and make that a new section. You know, that's what I did as an arranger, and that's what all the cats would do, is take this kind of surprising outlook on a melodic bass line, or melodic line. I shouldn't even say bass line. And what can you do with these elements? And so that's what we did. You know, he brought this creative sense, and he was a great organizer. He was a sweet cat, inclusive cat. He wanted to hear from everybody. Just a great pillar in my world, you know, from all the time that I knew. I think for most people who work with him, an important cat in keeping this whole thing together, especially if you don't live in New York City. You know, we face different kinds of trials and tribulations outside of the city to try to validate what you do. And Mario was quite successful in that. You know, he stayed in New York City, and he lived there for a little bit, but pretty much lived in Connecticut for the most part, and then Florida later on in life. But he was able to break through in a way, and it helped me break through in some cases in a big way too. So yeah, I'll miss him.
Yeah. No, it's interesting what you've been saying, because I've been thinking about it. Like, you and Thomas and Mario, you know, you've been doing mostly band leading stuff, and yet you each of you have developed such unique sounds on your instruments as players. It's you know, you're not following anyone in a sense. Well, I don't know. It's like now you have on guitar, let's say, like, it's hard to sometimes distinguish players, you know, like the new generation, let's say players from 25 to 45, they all sound, I will not go into name calling, but the same, you know, the same kind of delay-ish lines going on. Which is nice.
Preaching to the choir now, really are, man.
It's nice playing. But just like
great playing.
It's boring, at least to me.
You know,
I don't know.
Great playing.
I don't know. I'm honest. I'm just honest, you know. But
man,
it's amazing. Those guys are technically way better than I am. But it's just like, you know.
You're saying the same. You're preaching to the choir. You know, I don't know how you are with it, man, but you can't mention names. But I hear a couple of measures. I say, okay, I'm done with it.
Yeah.
You know, whether it be the sound or the intention or any of it, it's
predictable.
No, it's so predictable and it's so limp.
Yeah.
And, I went into the trio, and I just plug in an amp and play. That's it. I don't use effects. Not that I'm against any of that. It's just this is my sound. Just as everybody has, they say this is my sound. So this is my sound. So that alone makes the trio unique.
Yeah,
to play an expansive music. My only device is I put reverb on 2, and that's it. So what you get, and you know how hard it is, man. You're trying to create excitement and just playing flat, almost flat. It's quite a challenge, but I feel good about that. So when people speak about sound, I mean, what do you say about it? I say it's as honest as it gets.
Yeah.
I plug into an amp and put the reverb on 2, everything else halfway up. Let's play.
Yeah.
I'm just not geared for the other thing, And I also think this. I think that oftentimes, there are players that work so diligently on their electronic sound and the different color, and I can't do that. I tried to do that to the pedals and different sound techniques, and it was so stressful for me because I was so uninformed about it. It became such a burden. I sold everything.
Yeah. Sure.
One little. And I got one guitar, an old guitar I have, and it, for me, my psyche said, "Okay, I'm done with it. This is what you're gonna get."
Yeah.
So I appreciate it all. It's just for me, I couldn't deal with any of it, and it kept changing, too. The technology would change so often. It's like, man, I'm not geared for that. I gotta write some music. I don't have time to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I don't begrudge anybody who can do it. I can't do it. I tried. I can't do it.
No, but that's why you sound original, at least to me.
I hear you.
I don't know. It's just
Thanks for that.
It's when I hear Joe Morris. It's the same,
He's another cat. I love man. He digs in and plays straight.
Yeah, that's
another
it.
cat.
Yeah, it's like you kind of are. Joe is even more on the outside, like but. I like this idea. Jim Hall was the same when I saw him live. He was just like
Jim Hall was the same.
It's
big influence. It's like what can you do with just a straight guitar sound? You can different things, chordal things, energy, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do just with that one sound. Saxophone players do it all the time.
Exactly.
So why can't we?
Exactly.
But I must say, man, it would be nice if somebody can just say, okay, now plug in with this and use these sounds. I don't know. Maybe I never would go back. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. You never know.
Never know.
You never know. Yeah. But Michael, what's still on the schedule for you for this year? Do you have some new recordings coming up?
I'm trying to work on it. I do some duo things with a bassist, Rich Syracuse. I don't know if you checked any of those out.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Great player, more of a straight ahead kind of cat, playing with more jazz kind of cats. But I work with him. He teaches at this school that I teach at too. So probably for the past 12, 13 years, we've struck up a musical relationship. He's a buddy of mine too. So we were able to put out some different kinds of records, but a duo record. We did Wayne Shorter, and we did a Mingus. Beautiful. And we did a Bill Evans tribute.
Wow.
So it looks like in May we're going to go in and do something else. I don't know. Maybe we'll do some original music, maybe just some standards. But we need to keep this thing going. So that's coming up in the near future. And I'll probably play some more local kind of gigs with him. And we'll see what Company of Heaven can dig up for me between now and February when we actually go out. But there's some small little joints around where I live up here that can keep your chops up. Plus the school thing too. So, but there's not enough, Samo. There's not enough. I don't know what it is in your world, but there's not enough work.
Zero.
Things have changed in the 3 or 4 years. So it's pretty minimal.
It is.
Unfortunate.
Yeah. It's just 1 or 2 tours per year. That's it. That's how you get to play with the top cats, and that's it.
Yeah. That's it.
But it's okay, you know. I still consider it a privilege. So it's you know, I'm happy this way also. So.
And you can keep you have enough going, man. I checked you out, man. You have enough things going that I mean, just to look at your, I mean, you made a lot of records. You're on a lot of, right?
I did a lot of records. Yeah. Yeah, I love doing it. So, you know, it's
well, I mean, you can keep busy in that world, you know, and recording and the work. I mean, maybe the work will turn around. I don't know what society's got for us, but you know, I know one thing. You got to keep writing the music. You got to keep your chops up, and you got to play when you can play, and hopefully things will turn around a little bit. But if not, it's okay.
It's okay. Exactly.
I'll deal with it this way.
Exactly. Yeah. Fantastic, man. So I think I'll end here because you ended it so nicely now with this statement. So.